I am so excited. So, guys, welcome to the Embodied Woman podcast. Amber Susa and Siri Baruc Thornton. I'm saying my name today because Amber told me to.
I did.
Um, we are interviewing someone that I'm so excited about. I met Danielle. Well, I didn't meet her. Actually, I've never met her. I've worked with her on Zoom in a
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
Um, I found her on Instagram, just like randomly, I think, and took a course of hers.
What kind of course was it, Siri?
I mean, she's a sex pleasure coach. And I just want to say, on behalf of Jake, my
Mm,
husband,
yes.
that he was very happy with the results of that
Well,
course.
I'm sure Danielle will appreciate that. I'm sure she hears that a lot, don't you? Wouldn't you think?
I think she probably does.
That's
And
great.
I felt more confident,
Yeah.
because over time in a relationship and over the course of relationship, it's like you kind of like build up these preferences and ideas of what you like and don't like, and then you get stuck on certain things. And
Right.
I feel like one of the things that she does is like helps kind of like loosen up those stuck energies or those stuck ideas or beliefs or wounds. I feel like that's a lot of what she probably does. I haven't worked with her one on one yet. I was listening to her podcast last night and it was really cool. So I just want to read to you guys about her. So Danielle Savory, I mean, talk about a perfect name.
I was gonna say,
Like last time,
sweet or savory?
yeah, we were talking about names being perfect, like Sonnet's name being perfect for her.
That's right.
And Savory, I mean, come on, is a
That's how
master.
that's how you pronounce it. Wow.
I mean,
That's
how
incredible.
unless it's Savory, but I feel like it's
Savory.
Savory because that's what I
Yeah.
remember hearing.
Okay.
So Danielle Savory is a master certified coach, podcast host. She has a ton of episodes, like I don't know, hundreds. An
Mm.
expert in the field of neuropsychology, mindfulness, sexual pleasure, and intimacy. Danielle brings a unique perspective to coaching, helping clients understand the ways in which the brain and body are interconnected and how this connection can be harnessed to experience the sensual pleasure the body is wired for.
Mm.
As the host of the popular podcast called It's My Pleasure, Danielle has explored a wide range of topics related to sexuality, relationships, and personal growth, empowering women to embrace their sexuality and prioritize their pleasure. Danielle is a master certified coach with over 10 years of experience coaching hundreds of women with her proven process of increasing desire and expanding orgasmic capacity.
I
Amber,
mean,
thoughts?
yes, absolutely. I can't wait to learn more. I'm just, I've said this before. I said this when we had our conversation with Heidi. Like
Yeah.
this whole conversation around sexuality and sensuality, the fact that we're having it, like it's so normal. It's so natural. It's
Mm.
so like our body is literally made to experience pleasure in a way that is like crazy. And yet we have been conditioned to be embarrassed or ashamed to talk about it. and
Mm-hmm.
and so I feel excited like that we're getting to have this conversation, and it's so much a part of who we are as women, our sensuality and our
Our
sexuality.
power. Yeah.
Like it really is. And I love it. I love it. So I mean, I was watching one of her Instagram stories and she was talking about how orgasms are good for the brain. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear more. I mean, there's so much that I want to hear about what she knows and all of her wisdom.
I feel like it's probably similar to exercise. You have that release, you have that
Yeah.
rush and flush of energy.
Yeah.
and everything relaxes in the body. The brain relaxes, all the organs relax, right? And
Yeah.
then you have that release. You have probably serotonin and dopamine and endorphins and all of that happening.
Hmm. Yep.
I'm sure like read this quote once that was like, you're either making sex hormones or stress hormones
Oh, interesting.
at any given moment.
That's really interesting.
And I know one of the things that I've heard her talk about is this kind of like warming up to sex with your
Hmm.
partner, that it's like, if you know your guy is going to be coming over, maybe it's like a week ahead of time, or a day ahead of time, or even a few hours. Like you start getting in the mood by texting each other, saying how excited you are to see each other, like, what are you going to wear, or things like that. Or
Hmm.
if you live together, she talks about like that sex doesn't just start the moment that you get in the bedroom or wherever, that it starts
Yeah.
with like a little compliment, a little, text from the other room, like touching them in a certain way, like all of those kind of little gestures throughout the day, that's the beginning of foreplay.
Hmm.
And so then by the
Yeah.
time you actually get to the real foreplay, you're like, you're in the mood, you're ready to go.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to just comment on is like how I think men and women are this way, but especially women. But I know some men that are like sensitive, and as most men are, but they don't always show it, that like they want to feel emotionally cared for and in the
Oh,
mood, like I know for me, one of the things Danielle does is she helps women get out of their heads, right? Like on her Instagram, I was looking at that about
yeah.
getting out of your head and not,
Yeah.
because if we're in business mode, for example, or mothering mode, we're thinking about 100 to-dos, like we're not going to feel sexy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the things that you and I do, the practices you and I do, are so integral to getting out of your head, like preparing you for having a better sex life.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. I know for me, I mean, we talk about this all the time, but dancing, like there, a lot of people spend the majority of the time in their head. That's what you just said. And I think
Yeah.
that's accurate. So dancing is definitely a way to get into your body and also to come into the present moment and also to connect with your innate sexuality and sensuality. So for me, I just went and got a smoothie, and the woman, she's so sweet. She was like, I watched your Instagram and I see you're doing your dancing and it's so great. She's like, I'm jealous. I can't dance like that. And she's like, I'm very stiff. And I said, it really, that's just like permission. Stiff is like you're not comfortable in your body, right? And so
Mm.
as a woman, it's like
Or you're just holding that tension
you're
because you don't
holding
know
that
how to
tension.
release it.
You don't know how to release it. And we all have our own, stories and conditionings of like what's okay and what's not okay. And so, I said to her, I was like, I would love to have you come take my class because it's not about looking good. It's about feeling good, because when you feel good from the
Mm.
inside, then you look good. Cause like, like
Mm-hmm.
your video that you posted recently, your Instagram live where you were dancing in your kitchen, like I could feel that you were feeling good on the inside. And so that comes out. Like you're like, oh, Siri's looking sexy. She's looking good. But it's not because the dance steps were a certain way. It's because you were feeling from the inside. So that's what I was telling this woman today. I'm like, if you give yourself permission, like to not care about what it looks like, and
Yeah.
just to connect with your body and connect with the music and like have fun and be playful and be sexy, then all of a sudden it's like, damn, she's sexy, because
Mm.
you're feeling it.
giving yourself that inner liberation to just that permission to
Yeah.
just explore what feels good from the inside out.
Yeah.
Do you find that, like, how do you marry that? I know this is sort of a tangent question, but
Mhm.
because you do choreographed dancing
Mhm.
and then like, but then like, how do you marry the kind of the inside out feeling? Like when you're creating your dance routines, is are you like, let me infuse this with this feeling and therefore these moves are going to be creating this feeling, or is it just all very intuitive? Like, how does that work?
Well, the particular class that I'm teaching right now, it's choreographed. The choreography comes to me and I learn it. So it's more about me tapping into the expression of the music,
Okay.
of the moves. And then I don't always follow the choreography to a T, because
Yeah.
like sometimes I'll just want to freestyle, and like I'll make eye contact with the gals in the class, and I'll run around the room, and I'll just be silly and I'll be playful, and
Hmm.
and I'll notice, like, there's this woman, Carrie, I love her so much, and I've watched her like get more and more comfortable in her body. And
Mm-hmm.
so whenever we do, like, like super like hip roll sexy, like she gets so into it, and I'm like, yes, like I love it. I love watching women start to own, their power. So it's not even really about the moves. Like if you just watched the moves, they're not, they're fine, but it's the expression
Yeah.
of, and the feeling and the connecting with the body, and it just feels good.
Yeah.
It just feels good to move your body. And also, like, I sing a lot to the music, so like i'm I'm like, it just in full expression. And so
Yeah.
because I do that, I give permission to every single woman who's in my class to also be in full permission. And then it's just like a playground for expression and freedom.
Yeah, and that can be foreplay, not in the class necessarily, but like, well, it
Yeah,
could be because you're getting yourself more embodied.
totally.
Um, but also like dancing for your partner.
Uh-huh. Yeah, for
That could be
sure.
part of your, I mean, I bet Danielle has that in, yay,
Yes,
she's
she is.
here.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yeah, dancing for your partner, I think, is always appreciated.
Oh, I love your space. I love that
Oh,
rich
thanks.
green. Oh, it's so gorgeous.
Thank
And
you.
your shirt is lovely too. I love it.
Oh, thanks. It's kind of see-through, which makes me feel sexy.
Sexy.
Let me close my, I need to switch my things and close because that light is really intense in the back. 1 second.
So, okay, so we're gonna let you do that and
Okay.
keep talking. Should we keep talking?
Yeah, keep talking.
So we were talking about the ways that dance and breath work can get you out of your head and into the mood.
Mm-hmm. Yes, such a good one.
I just watched this movie last night. I think it's on Netflix. It's like something called like A Good Girl or A Nice Girl. And I just watched one of your Instagram stories, Danielle, when you were talking about like the list of things that you need to think about doing while you're having sex, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, like I'm having sex now, I got to come back to this. And in the movie, she totally does this. And so her boyfriend breaks up with her, and he's like, so she makes this checklist of
Mhm.
like 12 things that she needs to do to become more comfortable with her own sexuality. And so
Oh,
by the
Cool.
end of
Is
by
this
the
like
end of
a
it,
fiction or is it a
yeah, it's a Netflix film. It's
Oh,
not like a
fun.
docuseries. I know, I should have written it down, but it's like nice girls do this, or a good girl or something. But yeah, she's very, in the very beginning, like she's very not in her body and not comfortable in her own sensuality and sexuality. And then
Yeah.
a breakup is kind of her catalyst to explore what she's having resistance about. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that's definitely something that you see all the time, Danielle.
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
To say the least. Yeah. Yay. I'm so excited. Okay. Can you hear me good? Everything's
yeah.
okay. Okay.
So before you hopped on, we were just having a whole chat about what you do and your podcast and how I discovered you on Instagram and that I took your course, one of your courses. It was just like
Yeah.
a day Zoom course, and how appreciative my husband's been about that.
Yeah.
I did, and I said to
Yeah.
her, I go, I'm sure that you hear that there are a lot of very happy and grateful husbands
Yes.
and wives, but
Yeah.
but people in general,
Yeah.
Partners.
partners.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah, there definitely is. That's one of the perks, is getting the thank you notes from the partners on top
Mm.
of from the women. Yeah.
I am so curious how you got into this. When did this passion start? Was it from a young age? Was it more recent?
Yeah. So when did I start? I mean, it's always like, where did it really start? And it feels like
Yeah.
forever ago, like you're just like, it's been my whole life. I just didn't know it yet. But I really like intentionally started when I started coaching. It was really strange. I went through one of my first coach certifications, and we did this like visualization and journey thing, and like to help find kind of your niche, or where you thought maybe your area would be. And I didn't really have any idea. I was just like, I just know coaching is so great. It's helped me so much. It's helped me be calm and easeful. And I went on this like journey in this forest, and I was like going, and all of a sudden I met like this ancient indigenous man in the forest, and he was like, here you go, and gave me this box, and I opened it up, and it was this huge like purple dildo. And so
I
I
love
was
it.
like, oh, okay, like that makes a lot of sense actually. And then I just started from there, like, because I hadn't thought about that, because at the time it was so newer in the coaching world. You don't really hear about life coaches. You definitely didn't hear about sex coaches. People weren't talking about that on the internet, and so it just never crossed my mind that that could actually even be a thing. But then I started thinking about it, and how much of my ahas and my own embodiment and my own like experiences like really were tied with my sexuality and my experience of pleasure, and how I saw myself as a woman in the world. And then it just kind of went from there. But that's where that seed was planted. And then I realized how much life experiences, not only just personal growth, was in that area, and just went all in.
Well,
Amazing.
first of all, I want to hear more about that journey experience, because yeah, that sounds like a whole episode in itself. But
Yeah.
so I whenever we talk about sexuality and sensuality, like there's always, we all come to this place in our life where we have so many stories around it and so much conditioning. And like, I know I had an experience, one of my very first experiences with my own sexuality, when I was like second grade,
Yeah.
and feeling how my body felt rubbing up against the boy next door, and how natural that is. But like, my parents found us, and they had this conversation with us, and they did the best they could, and they explained that it was, when you get to be a grown-up, you fall in love, and this is called making love, and when you get married. And so I've told Siri this. I went to Catholic school, and we had to go do confession, and I literally said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I made love to Sean next door." And like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like I consciously carried that with me, but clearly, like, that planted a seed, that something that felt good and something that was natural, there was something not okay about it, and that I needed to either keep it a secret, or that there was something, to be ashamed of.
Shame. Yeah.
So, yeah. So I'd love to hear from you. You said that when you found this, it made sense because it kind of felt like it was your whole life leading up to it. Like, can you share with us, like, what were your own, kind of stories and conditioning, and then how
That
did
was
affect?
exactly what I wanted to know. Like, how did you get
So,
over any kind of shame around really being visible with this?
yeah, well, I mean, that's a different story, the shame of being visible. But like, with the life experiences that led to it, my parents were very open about sexuality, about pleasure. Like, my mom when I was younger, did those Tupperware parties, but for sex toys. So it's like, it was just like an open thing, and it was just never like a taboo sort of thing. But I also grew up in a very conservative community. So my best friends were either Catholic or Mormon. And so being in that, you know, especially when you're going through where your brain is changing and it's less about like your family support and more about your peer support, it felt very strange, because here we were having these open conversations at home that this is okay, this is part of, you know, who we are, and this is an important part of, like, you know, any human, you know, woman or not, but also as a woman, like, this is okay, and this is an important part of you. And then hearing such a contrast to that with my friends who didn't even want to get undressed, you know, in the locker room, that did, you know, felt so ashamed just of their body and were covering their bodies up, let alone having these conversations around sexuality. And then going into high school and having so many of my friends that might have been dating, you know, boys from the LDS school, but then they went on their mission, and then getting these letters back of like, oh my gosh, I sin, all these things that we did wrong. And, you know, they're dealing with their own stories because they're now off on their mission, and then sending these letters back to my friends, which then make them doubt everything and question everything. And we must have done something wrong. And so, you know, I was very immersed in this like dichotomy of like that this felt like a birthright. This felt like something that was just part of human, you know, human culture, and the way that we can relate and have intimacy and have connection. And at the same time, I was surrounded by people that really felt like that was wrong, or there was, at least how you said, Amber, right? Like there's the parameters around it. It's not necessarily that it's wrong, but only with love, or only in marriage, or only when you're an adult, right? And so when we put it into these boxes of parameters, that also made it very confusing, because, you know, hormones and growing, like you do feel good and you feel pleasure, and then you're like, wait, is this wrong? Am I not supposed to feel good? And all of the other conditioning that we really get, especially as women in this society of like, you know, you work hard and then you get a reward, or you don't, you know, growing up in the 90s, getting Victoria's Secret sent to our house and seeing these objects of pleasure just flooding, you know, flooding my mailbox, and Babe Watch, as my uncles called it, instead of Baywatch, you know, all of these images that we're getting, that it's like, this is kind of off limits. But also, if it isn't off limits, it's for men's pleasure, it's for male pleasure, it's for their gaze. And then trying to navigate that on my own, as we all do, of like, wait, but this isn't for me. So in order for me to feel loved and liked, then they should be attracted to me, and I should be pleasing to them, you know? And so that grew. I had a couple of sexual traumas sprinkled in there that I also had to navigate through. And then later, once my husband and I got married, I dealt with a lot of like body pain and physical body pain. I was basically bedridden for 2 full years. And it was really during this time that I was able to like get in my body and not just be in my head. And so learning how to find pleasure in a body riddled with pain, and also just a body that you're rejecting. It's like, oh, you're the cause of my sexual trauma. You're the cause of my rejection, dealing with beauty standards. Now I can't get pregnant, you know, fertility struggles. Now I can't even have a regular job because I can't get out of bed. Like, I hate you, body. And so how do you open up to a body that you are rejecting and expect to experience pleasure, let alone want to? So that was a long answer, but like a whole
Wow.
bunch of experiences that really led me to this.
I feel like
That
that,
is that
yeah.
is profound. That is profound. I feel like so many women have that experience of rejecting their bodies in
Yeah.
you know, some way. And God, I've never heard it said that way. That's so right. Like, of course it would be difficult to experience pleasure when the, you know, the vessel through which you experience pleasure is something that you are rejecting or feeling abandoned by in some
Yeah.
capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I hate you. I'm so mad at you. Oh, wait, can you make me feel good? Can you show me like how beautiful this relationship can be, when you're really like an abusive relationship and you're abusing yourself and your body mentally and the way that you're disconnected from it, but then hoping that when you do show up for those few minutes in a week or in a month, like, what's wrong with you? Why are you not doing what you're supposed to do for me?
Yeah, it feels like those 2 years, now looking back, are what gave you so much compassion and empathy to work with all kinds of women that are having similar struggles. And it's beautiful that you went through something that you can now give to others in that way.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's like when you're in it, you don't know, but I call it my magic body. I still deal with a lot of pain and health stuff, and I every time it comes up, it's so that initial reaction of like, great, how long is this going to be? How long am I going to be here? What is it going to keep me from doing? And it's like that very quick reactionary, and then I'm like, oh, I forgot, we're in a different relationship now. Like, hey, what do you need? I love you. I see you. I'm right here alongside with you. Like, we can go through this together. And just that shift, but continuously referring to it really as my magic body, because it's in those moments I always find that deeper connection with self and compassion and understanding, and as well as just what my body has to teach me and how else I can share that with other people.
That's
So,
beautiful. Yeah.
so this being the Embodied Woman podcast, we're just curious what the embodied woman means to you, Danielle.
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking at your podcast, I was really thinking of that, but um for me, in so many ways, I would say that the bodied woman is a pleasured woman. And the reason that I say a pleasured woman is because when we get so acquainted with our body, when we really understand the nuances, even if we're going through something like grief or anger or frustration or heartbreak or things that we would normally consider really challenging things, there's such a beauty and a pleasure when we can go into this sensate experience of it and that felt sense of it. And also, I think pleasure is one of those things that we just don't give ourselves permission for. And in order to really work through whether it's shame and the socialization or the mental load or nervous system regulation or whatever it may be, to give ourselves permission to actually experience pleasure, it's a long journey of embodiment and keep coming back to embodiment, and we get to expand our capacity for pleasure and sensuality the more embodied. So it's really like living our lives in our bodies rather than in our minds. But in order to do that, I think that there's so many borders and barriers and weeds we have to pull that other people planted that even allows us to land in our body. So an embodied woman is a pleasured woman and just a woman that like lives here in the felt sense of what's going on in her life.
I
A
love
pleasured
that.
woman. I love that too. When you were talking about, pulling the weeds out of
Mhm.
some of the old voices and old stories, we all have that in various, aspects of our lives. What are some of the things that you practice and that you coach women to practice that help pull out those weeds? And then how do you guide women to, plant a new garden of
Yeah.
of beliefs that
Of
allow them
sensual and
to love
sexual
their body?
pleasures and flowers. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Take out the
you know,
weeds.
yeah. I think, it's twofold, because I think that there's things that are planted or things that come up that feel very much more immediate. It's things that might be like, oh, I'm in a heterosexual relationship. I've been with my guy for 21 years, and like in our marriage, and I can notice my nervous system getting triggered or getting frustrated or irritated, like the mental load, and you're not helping, and you have no idea how much I'm doing around the house, and why don't you like, and realizing that's a barrier to my pleasure, like really like those immediate things like in our day-to-day lives that trigger us or take us out of our body or have us spinning in our mind or have us really frustrated, where even though we might not see it at first, it's really a denial for ourselves to feel good. So it's starting to understand those, starting to understand like what are some of the things day in and day out that pull me further away from connection to myself, connection to my sensual pleasure, connection to my partner, maybe connection to my kiddos, whatever that might be. And so that is what I would say is one thing, is just really noticing, like, when am I activated? When am I feeling that like when am I getting kind of more spinning and worrying and stress and living in my head rather than in my body? And then the other part of it is just starting to acknowledge like how much of our story with pleasure, or the narrative that we're telling ourselves about our sexuality, how deep that really goes. Because a lot of the women that I talk to, they don't realize how many messages have been planted in their brains without their consent from a very young age, about, like even looking at ourselves, even calling our body part a vagina or a pee-pee instead of like the proper name of vulva, and like how that has impacted the fact that this is like literally like boys calling their penis balls. Like, this is not something that we really see, in this patriarchal society. And like all of these like small, like little messages that like ding us away and have us disconnecting from our sexuality and sensuality in so many ways, but like calling them out and bringing them to attention, and having those conversations. Because even though you might not consciously think, like even as you said, Amber, right, might not consciously think that's playing, but it is, it is, those kind of stories play along in the background, especially when we're young, and the way that the brain works and the way that we go into these learned memories. It's like it's planted a very big weed. And when we take the time to see what those are, and to see what those unconscious beliefs are that have been playing in the background, and how to really help like start to wiggle them out of the soil by immersing ourselves more in pleasure positive narrative, because none of us have been in that from a very young age ever, because of the society we live in.
Oh my God, there's so many things.
It's just like
I'm thinking
we could have like 100 conversations about everything you've just said.
Yeah.
It's like
so many like things were popping into my head when you were talking, like questions I wanted to ask and things I wanted to expand on, and like things I wanted to speak to. Like,
me too.
I think one of the I'll ask and then you ask, Siri.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was thinking of, because I have a 9-year-old daughter.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm sorry, I have an 11-year-old daughter, a 9-year-old son. And I was thinking, like, if you could have a conversation with your younger self, as when you started to like be entered into the rest of the community that was like, more conservative, like, what would you say to help you navigate like easier? And what do you think would be the best way to support our young children to not like feel burdened by the beliefs that maybe we have been burdened by?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. And there's so many things. I mean, it's basically rewriting the entire like messages I think that I experienced as as a young girl, and how all of us have. But one of the biggest things that I find still coming up is this permission for pleasure, and that it can be for us. And it's like, yes, we kind of know that on a surface level, but watching my clients like get that on a cognitive level, and then get it deeper on a cognitive level, and then it start to click on a subconscious level, and then it starts to show up because of the actions they're taking. That's really where the magic is because of the way that it's been presented, it is literally never for us. And pleasure has always been such a taboo subject, sexual or not. It's like, get your work done and then you earn it, you deserve it. Or like on vacation, like, ooh, I get this special, different food that I don't normally get at home. And it's like such this special pleasure kind of thing. And it's like the way that we have been conditioned around pleasure is that it really does have to be earned, or it's not for us, or it has to wait till another time, versus like, no, pleasure is actually for you. It is your birthright. You are wired for it, and it's available at any given moment when we just turn our attention to it. So I have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old daughter, and just trying to like bring their attention. We're not really talking that much in the sexuality realm right now, but just to pleasure, like, hey, like, it looks like you're tired, like, no, take a rest now, and then we can get to the work, quote unquote, the homework later. It looks like you're, or bringing in small things like hot cocoa on a Tuesday night, because you can have hot cocoa on a Tuesday night. We do not need to wait for it to be this special occasion, just really starting to be like, you are wired in brain and body to experience all of these good moments, and that we can start turning towards them. But when it came to like the sex talk, I had just, there's always these different levels of sex talk. And I think that's one of the myths, is that you have one birds and bees and then it's done. And that's just not how it is. And so the first sex talk I had with my oldest daughter, which was just kind of like, what it is, and, how we can label it. And then just mentioning to her, she's like, well, why would you do this if you don't want to get pregnant? And it was like, because it feels really good. It feels really good, and it's going to light your body up, and it's going to like help you feel really connected to yourself and to like other people. And she's like, okay, I'm done now, and just knowing that was enough for right now. But really like starting to teach our young girls, like, this isn't something that's going to be taken from you, like your virginity. This isn't something that needs to, be like reserved just for like this, ideal guy or girl or whoever, right? That this is something that you are wired for, and that is going to feel really good and can be for you, not just a way that you can get an STD or get pregnant.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish we had this education.
Yes. I mean, can you imagine if we were just told at a young age, like, instead of like, boys are going to want this from you, like, you're going to have to be careful, watch out. It was like, we were already trained from such a young age to be on guard,
Yeah.
and that we could be harmed. And then we wonder why we're on guard when your husband like grabs your booty when you're cooking dinner. It's like,
Yeah.
I wonder why. It's
Well,
because we've literally been trained to be on guard
I
from this very
also
young age.
I also feel like I was talking to Amber about this the other day, about my husband and I having a conversation about me saying to him, I like us just fooling around sometimes, like doing a little bit of this or a little bit of that in the bathtub, or in, when we get in bed, and and this I got from you, Danielle, it not having to actually lead to sex.
Yes.
Because it just takes the pressure off. Because it is like, when you mentioned that, I was like, oh my God, yeah, if my husband touches me while I'm cooking, I am a little like, oh, what, you want sex right now? Oh,
Yeah.
like, it's a little of a reaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if I kiss
If I'm
you
not,
open mouth, if I
yeah,
give you a passionate kiss, and he's like, oh, I know what's going to happen later tonight. And like feeling like we have to, if we give a little, and you think back to, it's like, you're either a tease or you're a prude, right? So it's like
right.
you have to like, or a slut, right? So we had these buckets where none of them were good choices, where it's like, no, I can feel alive. I can make out with you on the kitchen counter, and then I can go back to reading my book later. Like, this does not mean that I'm consenting to anything later on, even though we've been together for 21 years. Like, I can say no at any point, and that's okay. And that is such an
Yes.
empowering thing. Yeah.
And not feel guilty.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
you
And I
said,
think
actually, I changed my
redefining
mind.
sex. Yeah. Like, I'm actually not feeling it. I can't really get into it, and giving yourself permission to change your mind, but also redefining, especially like what quote unquote sex is. Because again, like, the myth that we've been taught is that it's like P and the V, like that's what it is. And when we think of that as the goal, or what we're always trying to get to, or what we should be doing or should be giving our husband, then of course it always feels like pressure. And that's not actually the thing that brings us with vulvas a lot of pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking in one of your stories about how also, like, as women, we're wired to think that it's our responsibility to please the man,
Yeah.
and how difficult it can be for a woman to be in the receptive mode, because, so
Yeah.
can you speak to that a little bit, like
Yeah.
how we can create that shift for ourselves, and just normalize it so that it's women know that they're not
That it's
alone in
okay.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, this is every woman, every single woman that I have coached or talked to, is we in general have a hard time receiving sexual pleasure or not. We've been taught to be the givers and the nurturers and the taking care of things. And you hear it from business podcasts talking about open to receiving abundance.
Mm-hmm.
We hear about it in the sexuality realm, hearing about receiving compliments, receiving help.
Mm-hmm.
Like, being receptive in general is very challenging for women. But then when it comes to our sexuality, again, it comes back to that guarding. It comes back to that, like those protection. And it's easier to feel like we are in control, not because it's easier by default, but because it's familiar. We can give, we can take care of, like, let me be with you and not really think about myself or my own needs. That has become such a habitual, mental event, but also a habitual body response that has created this disconnect from our bodies, where it's very much like touch out here rather than I'm feeling myself being touched. And so just starting with like the understanding of like what it means to receive, like even when somebody gives you a compliment, like, thank you, I received that. Or a child, or like something that your partner might say that's really kind, instead of like, oh, you're just saying that because you want to get in my pants. It's like,
Yes.
thank you, right? Like always feeling that it's this transaction thing, that we can actually just slow down and start receiving, and understanding that every time you notice kind of that guard, that it's like creating that safety in your nervous system, coming back and being like, oh, woman, like, of course you're a little nervous. Like, I'm being exposed, I'm vulnerable, because in order to receive, we are in a very vulnerable position, and we have to let our guard down to really expand our capacity for pleasure. But it feels clunky at first. It feels really awkward, and like consistently like being on your own side, like, oh, there you are. I notice you tensed again. It's okay. Let's relax. This is somebody you can trust. Let's just notice like the fingertips or the kiss. Let's like soak that in, and just step by step, like really creating that safety around the experience.
Mm.
Amazing. I'm curious about being in a relationship for a really long time and ways in which you help women to reignite the spark.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to remember is, again, it comes back to like what I was just saying, familiarity. And in order for us to really feel like that turn on and that spark, is the brain wants to be interested. So in order for the brain to be interested, there has to be novelty, otherwise like the brain just wants to go with what it knows and what's easy and what's efficient and what's familiar.
Yep.
Paying attention on purpose takes a lot of energy, and your brain's like, nope, I don't want to do that. Like, nope, it's easier for me to assume I know exactly where this is going. It's easier for me to just not even actually look at the person in front of me, but allow like this entire self concept of my partner that's playing in the background always be playing, so I don't have to actively think about the person who's actually in front of me through a
Mm.
curious lens.
Oh my
And so
God.
when we start to shift this, when we start to be like, oh, like, look at them, like, look at those wrinkles around the corner of his mouth when he's laughing with my daughter. Like, when did those come here? Like, oh, sweet man, like, make out with me right now. It's like really, truly seeing this person again and coming back to like that curiosity, instead of letting your brain assume You're going to know what that kiss feels like feel it like the first time, and you're going to feel
Wow.
the butterflies again. They're right there. You can come back and be like, what's here? I haven't actually kissed this person ever before in this moment of time where my brain is right now, where my nervous system is in this place, and like my brain is quite stubborn. So when I give it the facts like that, it's really helpful because my brain's like, you're being stupid. You've kissed this guy a million times. And I'm like, no, you haven't. We actually have never been here in this moment of time. And also the cells on my lips always are regenerating brain. So let's just see what's here this time. But like helping yourself get curious again.
That's amazing. Oh my God. And it's
So
everything you're
after,
saying. Yeah, go ahead, Amber.
no, I was just gonna say, like, I just think because I'm divorced twice, so I have not been with the same man for 21 years.
Yeah.
But I think it's so hopeful to hear from you. It gives me a tremendous amount of hope to hear from you that you can still experience the butterflies. You can still experience novelty
Yeah.
after, after that long. Because I think that's one of my fears. Like, when that novelty wears off, like it can be addictive, that excitement and that newness. And so I love hearing about that, like that is possible.
It is, and it takes effort. A lot of people are like, oh, well, it didn't take effort before. And I'm like, yeah, because it was brand new. And there's so many things I think that we almost glorify that moment where there was so much self-doubt, there was so much awkwardness, there was so much all of these other things. And you're really only reminding yourself about that like feeling of excitement. But that feeling of excitement is something that we can cultivate. It is something that we can generate within us, and even some of the awkward things. But reminding ourselves too is like it doesn't actually have to be like people or articles, media always talks about like spicing it up and sparks and like all these things, and there'll be different positions or bringing a toy in, or some people open up their marriages. Like there's all this grasp for the novelty, when really all we need to do is put different glasses on. And when you put a different lens on, you could be having the same like quote unquote boring vanilla sex forever, and it can be a mind-blowing, completely different experience every time when you allow it to be.
Mm. It's so vulnerable to I'm just
Yeah.
feeling like the vulnerability of that.
Yeah.
And then also
Yeah.
I'm thinking about relationships and how there's some relationships where you feel incredibly safe, and then there's some relationships where you feel incredibly excited. And to marry
Mhm.
the two, I feel like that's something that women have kind of struggled with. Like there's the exciting guy and then there's like the safe guy.
Yes, totally. And I think what's so funny is like a lot of like the women, if they've been in really long-term relationships and they come to me, and then I I bring up a conversation they could have or something that they could maybe, lean into or talk, and they're like, "Oh, I couldn't," even though they've been with this person for 25 years. And it's like, look, there's the butterflies right there. All we had to do was have you bring up one conversation, like they're right there. But we are so afraid of even sometimes being vulnerable with the safest person, because there is still that feeling of like, I could be rejected, I could get judged. And so even though it is like, I think there's something about sometimes with the risky ones, or like the fun, exciting guys or whatever, where you are putting yourself in this position where you might not be as vulnerable, where it doesn't feel, it's very much in the body, but like on a visceral level, where sometimes with the safe guys is when it feels the scariest, because there feels like this other level of vulnerability there. And that's again a generalization, but I do think it's fascinating to really think about what is actually creating this sense of safety, and sometimes it's just avoidance.
We talked
Um,
about, yeah.
no, go ahead.
I
I know
was-
we're both.
we talked about with Heidi, Amber's friend, in our first episode about the difference between having sex with your heart open and just having sex.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it reminded
Yeah.
me of that.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I wanted to speak to just the concept of safety. And when you were talking earlier and you were kind of demonstrating the conversations that you have with your own body, like, and your own, you know, self, like, hey, like, I see you. I understand, like, this is, you know, this is how you're feeling. And I love you. And I know that, you know, like that cultivating safety with ourselves, I think is so important. And I know for me is an embodiment practice. Like that's when I feel really embodied, is when I feel really safe with myself. And then, you know, any potential rejection feels a little bit less, you know, wounding, because I'm so in my own body and in my own, you know, embodiment. But I'd love to hear from you, kind of, if you could speak even more to the types of embodiment practices and how you cultivate that safety with your own body. And also, like, if you could just take us even a little deeper into your journey of going from the place of I hate you body to like the compassion that you now, it feels like you have a much more compassionate, loving, safe relationship with your own body. Like, can you share a little bit about that journey? I know that was a lot of questions, but
I mean, just to, I guess to recap, you know, I'll start just with that journey. And the first step is always awareness. You know, I mean, it really is. And I think that we forget that awareness is a cumulative, it's a compound, and it's constantly going because we keep living our lives. And so being so aware of when we're operating in reaction to what's happening in our brains, what's happening in our thoughts, you know, versus like, am I choosing this? Am I really choosing how I want to feel or how I'm treating myself? But understanding whether or not it's a choice of like the words that come through, or the old critical negative self-talk, or old memories, or whatever it might be, that I don't want to say damage, but I'm going to use that for lack of a better word right now. The damage is already done. Like, you've already been hurt. And so that, I think, is so important. And that's so quickly like brushed over, right? Like if you looked in the mirror and you said something to yourself, and then you quickly are like, just hop to like a positive thing, or I don't talk to myself that way, or whatever, like first check in with your body and see, like, did my body feel that? Like, was it just said in passing, or did it feel that, you know, because we're so quick to like see this awareness, or notice how we're talking, or how we're treating ourselves, or, you know, noticing pain in our body. And we just want to get to like fixing it and what's next. Where, you know, I love to think of the analogy of like teaching like my kids to ride a bike, right? It's like, if they are riding and they're like looking behind and seeing where I'm at, if I'm holding their bike still, or if I'm chasing after them, and then that makes their handle wheels turn, and then they fall off and they have a scratched knee, the first thing I'm going to go is like, oh, baby girl, are you okay? How's your knee? Let me kiss that. Let me take care of that. I'm not going to be like, see, you looked at me and then your bike fell, and like, now we're doing all these things, and let's get right back on and try it again. Like, first we have to see like the infliction. First we have to see the pain. First we have to see the harm. And that is consistently my own practice. And you know what happens when you are embodied is, because you might not think anything's going on, because those thoughts might not be in your conscious awareness, but you feel like your chest caving in, you feel your throat tighten up, you feel your pelvic floor like really clenching, and coming back and being like, oh, baby girl, you're hurt right now. Let me meet you. How are you doing? Can I invite some softness to this area? Like, what do you need to feel safe? What do you need to feel taken care of? And really giving yourself that space and realizing that is the work. It isn't just jumping to what's next, because the minute that we feel that, our body's like, oh, she is here for me. It is okay for me to open up. Or if I do get hurt trying this new thing, or putting myself out there, or being with a partner, I know she's got me. And when we do that, we just expand our capacity for so much more. But it's got to start by noticing just those little things. Like, it's so small. Well, just like I said, I just remember being on a hike and I didn't even notice. And all of a sudden at my chest, I was like, oh, hey, let me notice, and then go back into my brain. What was I thinking about? Where was I going? What caused that infliction after I was like, hey, you're okay. Like, let's look around. Let's be back in the forest. Put your hand on your heart. So I would say that has been both my practice, but also my journey is really just meeting my body, especially when it's in those activated or uncomfortable or painful situations.
We've never been this quiet before. I mean, honestly, I
No,
haven't.
it makes me want to cry. Like, it makes me want to cry
Yeah.
because I'm reflecting on our last conversation with Sonnet, and her description of an embodied woman. She was like, I've got your back. And that's what you were just describing, is like, I've got your back. And yeah, like, it just made me think about my like sweet little 16-year-old self that had some traumatic experiences with a boyfriend, and like how even though I'm 49, like, she still lives with me. And
Yeah.
even though I've done a lot of healing, that little girl who felt not in her power, right? Like, who
Mhm.
it she's still there. And so I love that you said that. Like, that's a practice. Like, see
Yeah.
that first, witness that first, have compassion for that. And then you get to move into like the more empowered place. But first, it's like that recognition, like, I see you, and I'm so sorry that happened to you, and I'm sorry that hurt.
Yeah.
And but I've got you now. Like, you're safe,
Yes.
and we're okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like what I think about is like, it's the mother's arms to the crying baby. And
Yeah.
can't, like that is the woman now. Like, that's what we forget so much, is like, we are this grown woman with so much wisdom and so much knowledge and so much to share. And then when that little girl in us gets triggered, we forget we have capacity. Like, she can go through her activation, she can have those feelings, she can have those experiences, but at the end of the day, you are still that woman that can cradle her. And like,
Yeah.
coming back to like that awareness of like, we have that capacity to like soothe her and nourish her. And I hear from so many women like, why am I not past this now, or I should have been, like, whatever it might be. And like, this is at such a deep like level, when we just understand like the different layers and the way that the brain's developed and the way that our nervous system is activated. It's not happening at this conscious thing. And like, of course it's still triggered, because that was a very like a core memory, or it was like a learned experience, or it was a habit of thought, or a habit of nervous system reaction. And so like, this isn't a you thing, this is a brain thing, and we can touch on it and love it. And also, that doesn't mean like years and years of healing. I think that's like the other thing a lot of people worry about, is like, oh my gosh, I have to like heal all of this stuff. And it's like, no, when we just consistently meet that part that's hurting, it doesn't really, it's not a time thing. It's not like, oh, I have to wait till I completely fix this wound. It's like, we're always dealing with that wounded part of ourselves, and the bounce
Right.
back time gets quicker and quicker the more we do it.
Amber, you reminded me, I also have 16-year-old girl
Mm.
trauma for sure. Thank you for saying all of that. That really was healing for me to hear both of you talk about that. And then it just, when Danielle, when you were talking just now, I was thinking like, how do you discern? Because now it's like such pop culture to talk about people pleasing. So
Mhm.
how do you discern between, because I felt like so much of the way that I was giving in my sex life was just because that's what I should do.
Yeah.
And then it became, I don't want to do that because it's what I did for so long because I was supposed to do it. I wasn't even thinking if I
Mhm.
wanted to do it. So how do you
Yeah.
discern between right now in this moment if you're people pleasing or if you're like doing if you're doing something because you want to? I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think it's a great question. And first of all, it's giving yourself permission to like not know at the beginning. Like, this is, like you said, it's years and years and years. And a lot of times we can confuse going out of familiarity, going out of habit as like a not wanting to, or like my body is telling me no, when it's like, no, it's also actually just because this is a new way that you're experiencing this thing. And so giving ourselves the grace to like understand our bodies more and our nuances, but also just assume that everything you've done in the past has probably been from a place of people pleasing and should. Not that you didn't enjoy it, not that you didn't experience it in a pleasurable way, not that you didn't have like these connected experiences, but like when we really, really dive into our education, I'm not just talking about education, but media influences, you know, even the way, and no fault to them, so many men have maybe, you know, experienced us because that they were learning the same exact messages that we were, that it's gonna take some time to like peel back the layers, but starting with just asking outside of the bedroom, because the bedroom can feel really, really charged for a lot of us, is to just start asking like, what do you want? Like, what do you want? Like very simple, and start noticing the things that you do want and what it feels like in your body when you want something. Because we as women were taught how to be desirable. We were not taught how to desire. And so we have to like reacquaint ourselves with the skill of wanting to begin with, so that we know what it feels like to actually want something. So then you can start to see it and to feel it. So when you do get in the bedroom and you're like, do I want this? Could I get curious? Let's see how it goes. That gives yourself the steps to have that willingness and openness and curiosity open, so you can start to find out. But understanding at first, especially if it's new, or that your body's probably going to be like, I don't know, want to, or I'm not really sure, and be like, oh, you're really nervous. Let's just see how this goes, and creating that safety to also stretch beyond what's familiar and comfortable.
This is a silly question, but when you
No, it's
said
not.
ask outside,
No, it's not.
outside, I feel silly asking it. When
Yeah.
you said outside of the breath, outside of the bedroom, ask, what do you want? My brain immediately thought you were saying for me to ask my husband, what do you want? And then I was like, wait, I think she means to ask myself, but I wasn't clear.
Yeah. Yes, you're 100% right. It's asking ourselves, like, what pen do I want to write with today?
Mm.
What do I want to have for breakfast? What sounds good to me? Like, you know, like what do I want? Like these kind of things of like, if I could do anything that I wanted to this afternoon, like what just sounds so juicy and amazing and delicious, and just start to notice how quickly our brain might be like, but you can't, that's unrealistic, you shouldn't, you probably should do this instead. Like we are so used to squashing any type of flame of desire so quickly with shoulds, that we really just want to notice when that dousing is happening, so that we can give ourselves like a chance to actually feel what it's like to want. Because then it becomes so much easier when we're in the bedroom of like, I want. And maybe at the beginning, you're not going to like want that much, but you want to feel like a turned on woman. You want to feel like a pleasured woman. So you're at least willing to get curious. And I feel like that's kind of the bridge between a full body yes and like a willingness, because we have been so conditioned from should, that we really have to start like detangling that. And it's not just like cut yourself off and then one. It's like, let's get curious. Let's be willing, because I really want to notice what it's like to feel a full body yes. And I don't know what that's even like yet. So I'm going to like tiptoe towards that. Again, creating that safety for your nervous system by doing those tiptoes, versus like it has to be a full body yes or it's a full no, which that's a very popular thing. And I'm like, it's not a thing for us women, because we really don't even know what a full body yes feels like. So giving ourselves that permission to work into it and know that there's nothing wrong if we don't know what we want right now.
I have so many things, but I want Amber to ask.
Yeah. Well, so I was just like thinking about how I'm so happy that we're having this conversation, because what you're talking about, how like we as a collective, okay, like we can pretty much look at our lives and go, yeah, pretty much everything that we did was because we were coming from a place of codependency and people pleasing. And so to step into this new place where all of a sudden we're making decisions because that feels right for us and good for us, right?
Yeah.
And then for me, I'm divorced now for many reasons, but one of them was because I started giving myself permission to ask myself what I wanted and what felt good for me and what felt right for me. And because we had this dance going where that was like not the case, it was like, you're being selfish, right? I mean, literally, I was told that. You are being selfish. What you think just because it feels good to you. And it's like, yeah. And like, I coach so many women who, you know, when we talk about like creating a life from that place of how do I want my day to go today? It's like, well, that's, you can't
crazy.
You can't do that. He says, you know, and it's like, but what if it did? Like, what if that is the new space that we're moving into where women like us are like, hey, guess what? I'm trying it out and I'm liking it a hell of a lot better than the old way. And so I invite you to try it out too. You know, because once you start to expand your capacity to experience pleasure, then it's like, oh yeah, like more please. What else can I do that feels good, that I enjoy? You know?
100%. And what we start to notice is like these things, you know, when I first started going through this myself of like doing things that felt really, you know, like I want, and this is from a genuine desire, I kind of had to go through this like period where it's like, I don't want to do anything, you know, like, because all of that stuff was coming from a place of should or coming from a place of pressure. And now like where I'm back to, it's like, I volunteer at the school. I know that sounds so silly, but it's like all the times before that I showed up, like as a parent to volunteer was because I felt like I was going to get judged if I didn't, or this is just what I'm supposed to do, or like, this is how I show my kids I'm involved, or like, there was so much like the people pleasing and the shoulds in the list. But it's like, when you like give yourself permission, like there might be this kind of cleansing period where, you know, just like a cleansing diet where you have to take a bunch of stuff out, but then you'll find that you actually like way more things and you want to do way more things. You're not just like a hermit, like living in a hole all by yourself, but it's like, we have to, you know, realize like what it feels like, and that there is these things that will come back in, and it feels so much better when it's genuinely because I want to be at this family gathering. I want to show up at my kids' school and volunteer my time. I want to have sex with my husband, you know, like there's so many things that get to feel so much better because it is coming from a place of desire. And I think that's the fear at the beginning is like, well, I don't actually want to do anything. And it's all coming from shoulds. And it might at the beginning, but then once you start, you know, going through that part of the journey and that kind of ripping off the band-aids in so many ways, you'll be like, oh, wait, I actually like way more than I thought when I take away the shoulds and the societal pressures around it.
I'm curious, Danielle, where you're up to now with your process of what feels like so juicy to you that you're implementing now with your clients, or just a new thing that you're learning or showing them, or a tool.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's a loaded question. I'm like, all the things. There's a few different things that I've just been so excited about. You know, one of them is really, I'm a brain person, I'm a nerdy person, and really kind of going out and talking to women about like, and this would have felt so scary before, but I truly feel like pleasure is the answer for us in so many ways. And one of my newest things that I'm working with, because it's the thing that allows us to experience good, but in an embodied way. And one of the things that I feel is very controversial, but that I'm just leaning more into is, working with my clients that the pursuit of pleasure is actually more worthy than the pursuit of happiness. And the reason is because we put like happiness and joy and all of these things here. But when we pursue happiness, I feel like there's so many ways that we can disconnect from our bodies, that we can actually, think we're happy because we're mentally thinking we're happy, but we're not actually embodied with it. Where when we pursue pleasure, it allows for more happiness, it allows for more joy, it allows for more satisfaction. But there's also like such this beautiful spectrum of allowance, because when you're pursuing pleasure, you're finding pleasure in so many things that we would say is negative, right? Because it's like there's something about the pursuit of happiness that kind of poo-poos on our other experiences like grief or struggle or challenge. And when we give ourselves permission, you can use pleasure through the challenging times. You can use pleasure to connect with yourself when you're heartbroken. You can use pleasure to heal. You can use pleasure to propel you into abundance and to bring into more moments of joy and peace and equanimity. And so, for me, really working on pursuing pleasure. And I created this training called the Pleasure Centered Coach Training. And so I'm with my first cohort right now of coaches really learning this theory and the neuroscience behind it and the neuropsychology of helping their clients, not necessarily sexual pleasure, but pleasure in general, to help them pursue that and prioritize that. And how all of the other pieces, like I got business coaches in there, postpartum coaches, sex coaches, I got OBGYNs, like all of these people, right? Like of how when we teach, especially women, to connect with their bodies in a pleasurable way, all of the other doors that open. So
This is such incredibly important work that you're doing on every level, and I'm just so grateful that you're doing it. I'm so grateful that you're nerding out into it. I'm so grateful that you're visible and that you're speaking about it and that you're making this mainstream. And that we can have this conversation and that you came on to talk to us. I just feel like we got a crash course in everything pleasurable. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'm just so happy to be here. And it's the permission that we've always needed. And it's just so cool. I mean, like I said, the nerdy bits of it, but when you really study the science of like a pleasured brain or the nervous system with pleasure, not to mention what we see behaviorally and connection and relationship wise, it's like, it really is so healing and nourishing and exactly what we need, I think, especially right now in our world, in our society.
Mm-hmm. It feels like you're really embracing the shadow aspects.
Yeah.
And don't you think too, I just was thinking, like, when you were talking about that, I think when you give yourself permission to like be this your own source of pleasure, then any relationship that you're in, it's like you bring your fully pleasured self, and then it's like you get to play, as opposed to expecting for the something else outside of you. And like, I just think telling somebody like, no, it's actually really good, it's actually okay, it's actually healthy, it's going to benefit you and everybody in your life. Like, oh, I get to do this, it's okay, like I'm not being selfish, I'm not being bad, I'm not being wrong. Like, no, it's gonna serve every area of your life if you become the source of your own pleasure and give yourself permission, whether that's sexually or any other area of your life. I love that so much.
How many times we actually deny ourselves that, and it's like, for what? Or like you said, waiting for someone to deliver it, which is the other flip side of the coin of like being somebody that gives pleasure. We also expect somebody to just like know how to please us, where it's like, it doesn't matter. You could have like the best sexual partner ever, and if you're spinning in your head or you don't feel safe, nothing's going to feel good.
Yeah.
Danielle, thank you so much for your time. We so appreciate you. And we're so excited to be in sisterhood with you in the quilt.
Yay.
And,
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been my pleasure.
Where can people find you? What do you want to share? I mean, we're going to share your podcast.
Yeah. So I have a podcast called It's My Pleasure, where I discover all, or go through all these kind of topics around pleasure. And practical tools of mind and body to start experiencing more. And you can follow me on Instagram at the practice of pleasure. Fingers crossed, I haven't gotten shadow banned or deleted recently, so I'm hoping to keep that up. And then if you're interested, of course, in any of my courses or my training or anything like that, you can check me out at daniellesavory.com.
Fantastic. Yeah.
We love your name too, by the way. We were like, how perfect is that her last name is Savory? It's all about pleasure. And
yes. I know. It was like I was born to do this. My husband's like, "Are you sure you don't want to just?" Because that's not his last name; it's my maiden name.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I was like, "No, I think it's this, especially professionally."
Perfect.
It's so perfect.
Well, we're gonna wrap
Thank
up,
you
but we'll
so
let
much.
we'll let you hop off, and we'll send you everything.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, Danielle. It's been a pleasure.
It has. Thank you. So great to connect with you all. See you later.
See you
Bye.
soon.
Bye.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry I kept jumping. I was like, I had so many things I wanted to say. So.
No, I was doing the same thing. I think it was interesting because normally when we interview people, we have a really seamless flow and we have so much to say and we kind of just know what we're doing. But I felt like we were so absorbed in what she was saying and we were just taking every word in like so deeply and we were just so curious that we kind of like, for me anyway, kind of like forgot we were interviewing her and like doing a podcast and in some moments and just kind of wanted to like settle into just the energy of what she was talking about. And just sometimes I had so much to say. And then sometimes I was just like, I have nothing to say because there's just so much goodness here. I don't know. It was an experience.
Yeah. Yeah. She was like delightful. I mean, just so embodied, like really just, you could just feel her like level of comfort in her own body. You know, like, I don't know. I felt that just the wisdom, you know, I love the age that we are all at relative. I don't know exactly how old she is, but I just think that we've lived such, you know, we've lived a lot of
rich lives. Yes.
Had a lot of experiences. And so the wisdom and the place that we are at in our lives right now, like, it feels really good. And I love that she's making it her mission to give women permission to pursue pleasure in their lives.
What I particularly liked was how nerdy she is. I love that she is into the science and the psychology.
Yeah.
The neuropsychology, like, because, you know, there's other pleasure coaches out there, and I don't necessarily feel like they have all of this kind of science psychology backing as much as she does. And I feel like that marrying of the science and the sexual pleasure, understanding like just the basics of everything. Like, I feel like she's got like the full spectrum picture more than, you know, what I've ever experienced.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. It's very fascinating. I could have talked to her for a lot longer. Like, I wanted to hear even more about it. But it makes me think about like how, like, I always have this feeling as far as like the gifts that we're given, like our unique talents and gifts, like if we're given this, like, why would we not be meant to like use them in their fullest capacity? Right. And I feel like it's the same for like the way that our bodies can naturally experience pleasure. Like, if we have this natural, like, we came into this world, like our bodies actually, like, biologically, physiologically have the capacity to experience such tremendous pleasure. If we were given that, why would we not be meant to experience it in its fullest, greatest capacity.
That's right.
And I think that in both scenarios, using our gifts and our talents and also experiencing pleasure, like it's because of the messaging that we've been receiving all of our lives. Like, no, it's not okay.
Well,
it's not okay.
The fully embodied woman who's in her power has been quite scary for men because it's a lot. It's a lot of power. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they were like, how can we squash this? Let's pit them against each other and tell them it's bad and wrong. And
I know. It's really sad. It is sad. And also that is changing.
Yeah.
I hope. And
yeah, women are circling, and we are educating ourselves, and we are growing, and we are empowering ourselves, and we are lifting each other up.
Yeah. No, I've talked to you about this, like the psilocybin journey that I did like over a year ago. One of the main messages that came through for me was, why did we all forget
Right.
how powerful we were? And it was this whole thing. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help all of us remember, because something happened along the way where we were, conditioned to forget our power. And so now I'm like, yep, that's what it is.
I mean, like, look, obviously men forget their power too. So, but
nobody wins when we're not in our power. No man or woman wins when we're not in our full authentic power.
Yeah.
Of our divine essence.
Yeah, because we're not just like on the embodied woman trying to man hate.
No, in fact, we've talked about having a men on.
Yeah, we want some embodied men. Let's invite some embodied men.
I love men. I would love to know more embodied men and hear from them. because it's true. Like, I think I have been with, quite a few not embodied men. And so it would be super wonderful to have some examples of embodied men come on who
we were talking about in the car on the way back from our little mini retreat what we thought an embodied man is, and this is a whole other conversation, so we should wrap up Danielle's episode. But I want to say I'm so grateful that we're doing this podcast. I'm so grateful for you, Amber. I'm so grateful for Danielle for saying yes. As you always say, just say yes. Like, thank you to Danielle for saying yes. And I'm so excited to share this episode with women, because the more we can talk and, like you were saying, normalize these conversations like we did with Heidi, like Heidi's doing, like the more we can all be more empowered and more embodied women, and we can rise together and we can lift our men.
Yes. Absolutely. I want us all to be, every man, woman, and child, to be in their full authentic expression and divine essence and power. And
amen. Amen.
That's the world that I want to live in.
Awesome. Yay.
And
well, I'm so looking forward to our next, because we have so many, oh my goodness, so many women we are about to learn from. I mean, it's like, it's great. It's awesome.
I know.
All right.
Yeah. We've got another conversation tomorrow and another conversation the next day.
I gotta start editing.
Let's go.
Okay. Bye.